I never thought a house could feel like a betrayal. I walked up the driveway one quiet evening, my heart heavy, and saw my parents talking to my sister on the porch. They were smiling, laughing even, but the warmth I expected wasn't for me. My parents had just handed my sister the house I thought I would inherit. I froze, staring at the familiar door, the windows I had polished with my own hands, and then it hit me. I couldn't believe they didn't realize my name was on the deed. I felt a mix of shock, hurt, and a quiet anger I didn't know how to name. How could they make this mistake? Or did they even see me at all? The air felt heavier than usual, like the house itself was holding its breath. I grew up in a house filled with laughter and quiet routines. My parents were careful, gentle people, not the kind to raise their voices, but they had this unspoken way of showing love through small gestures, warm meals, and steady guidance. I remember Sunday mornings in the kitchen, the sunlight spilling across the table while my sister and I argued over who got the last piece of toast. "Share it, please," my mom would say softly, and somehow we always did. My sister and I were close, though different. She was outgoing, bold, and always ready with a plan, while I preferred quiet corners, books, or simply watching life move around me. I loved the sense of balance we brought each other, her energy, my calm. Our parents often commented on it, smiling at how we completed each other without realizing it. The house itself carried our memories. The living room where we built forts from blankets, the back porch where we'd sit during summer evenings, and the small study where I spent hours drawing and planning my future. Every corner had a story, every wall a memory. I never imagined any of it could become a point of tension, or that one day the walls would witness confusion, hurt, and regret instead of laughter. Our parents had always been thoughtful, though sometimes their decisions were quiet and surprising. They loved us both equally, or at least I believed they did. We never spoke much about inheritance or money. It wasn't the kind of house where those things were discussed over dinner. Still, there was always a sense that one day this home would somehow belong to one of us. Family dinners were simple, but they carried weight. My father would talk about his day at work, and my mother would share small stories from the neighborhood. My sister often interrupted with jokes or plans for the weekend, and I would watch, smiling silently. There was a rhythm to our lives, an understanding that we each had a place in this home. It felt safe, predictable, and full of quiet love. Even the smallest gestures mattered. My sister would sometimes leave flowers in the hallway or fold the laundry in a particular way. I'd find her notes tucked into books, reminding me to rest or smile. We didn't always say thank you, but there was a language of care that ran between us. I never questioned it, never imagined that those gestures could later feel like ownership slipping from my hands. Looking back, I see now how fragile that balance was, how easily misunderstandings could grow into something heavier. At the time, though, everything felt grounded, safe, and familiar, the kind of life I thought would stay this way forever. It started with small things, almost invisible at first. My sister began spending more time in the house, claiming she wanted to help organize or redecorate. At first, I welcomed it. I thought it was her way of caring, of keeping our shared memories alive. But slowly, the feeling of intrusion grew. She would rearrange things without asking, move furniture that I had carefully placed, or comment on how this space could be better. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, when I noticed her fiddling with the living room bookshelf. "Why don't we just move these books over here?" she said casually. I tried to keep my tone light, but there was a quiet edge in my voice. "I kind of like them there," I replied. She laughed softly, shrugged, and moved a few books anyway. I watched her, feeling something tighten in my chest, a mix of irritation, sadness, and a strange sense of helplessness. Our parents didn't notice, or maybe they did but thought it was harmless. They often praised her for being so helpful or so organized, and I nodded along, even though inside I felt smaller each time.
It wasn't that I didn't love her. I did, but there was a subtle shift in the energy of the house, a gentle tug between what I thought was mine and what she now treated as her own. Late at night, I would sit alone in the study, thinking about how things had changed. The house felt different. Her laughter, once comforting, now carried a hint of possessiveness. I found myself walking more cautiously, touching familiar objects lightly, almost afraid of making a mistake or claiming space I felt slipping away. The tension grew more obvious over the next few months. Small disagreements turned into quiet arguments. One afternoon, my sister called me while I was at work. "I was thinking of repainting the living room," she said casually. "Maybe a lighter color, something brighter." I hesitated. I I kind of like it the way it is," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "Oh, come on, it'll look better, you'll see." I wanted to argue, but I didn't. Instead, I felt a rising knot in my stomach, a mix of frustration and confusion. Why did her opinion feel louder than mine? Why did it feel like she was quietly taking over the space I had always considered mine? At family dinners, I noticed it too. Our parents seemed unaware of the subtle shifts, praising her ideas while barely acknowledging mine. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that they loved us both equally, but inside, a quiet unease began to grow. Every compliment she received, every small favor from my parents felt like another invisible line being drawn, one I wasn't supposed to cross. Even my friends noticed. I would mention a small frustration, like how she had moved my favorite chair, and they'd shrug it off. "It's just a house," they'd say. But it wasn't just a house. It was memories. It was effort. It was a part of me. And with each passing day, the feeling that I was losing my place there became harder to ignore. I started keeping more things in my room, holding on to personal items as if protecting them would somehow preserve what was slipping away. The quiet love I had felt for my sister began to mix with a muted fear that one day I might not recognize this home at all. The unease turned into small, tense silences. Sometimes we would sit in the same room, the air thick with words unspoken. I noticed the way she lingered in corners I used to call my own, and the way she casually referred to things as my idea or I moved this here. It wasn't malicious, at least I wanted to believe it wasn't, but it chipped away at the comfort I once felt.
One evening, I overheard my parents talking quietly in the kitchen. "I think it's time she had the house," my mother said softly. "She's ready, don't you think?" My father didn't respond immediately, and the pause hung heavily. I felt my heart tighten. The words were like a slow drip, filling the space between us with tension. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Later, when I tried to bring it up gently, my sister laughed it off. "Don't worry, it's just a thought," she said. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the thought was already shaping reality. Every gesture, every decision felt like it was quietly tilting in her favor. I began doubting myself. Maybe I was overreacting, imagining tension where there was none. But the small moments kept piling up, my parents' compliments, her subtle claiming of space, and the quiet dismissal of my suggestions. The house felt like a stage, and I was slowly losing my part in the story I thought was mine. And yet I stayed silent. I didn't want to hurt anyone, I didn't want to fight. But inside, the knot of unease tightened. I had no idea that this quiet tension, these small shifts, were only the beginning of something much bigger. I remember the day clearly, the day everything changed. I had been away for a short trip, returning home with the expectation of the familiar comfort and quiet warmth. But when I walked through the front door, the house felt different, almost unfamiliar. My parents were there, sitting on the living room couch, and my sister stood beside them, smiling nervously. "Welcome back," my mother said, her voice unusually bright. "We have some news." I nodded, unsure, my heart already beginning to race. "Okay." My father cleared his throat. "We decided to give your sister the house," he said gently, as if speaking to a child. "We thought it's time she had it. She's been so helpful, and, well, she deserves it." I froze, staring at them. The words echoed in my mind.
My sister looked at me, her smile hesitant now, and said quietly, "I didn't mean to." I shook my head, feeling the walls close in. "Wait, what?" I whispered, my voice almost breaking. "What do you mean, give the house? You know my name is on the deed." Silence fell. My parents exchanged glances, confusion and realization spreading across their faces. My sister's eyes widened, and I felt a sudden surge of emotions: shock, hurt, disbelief, and a quiet anger I had never allowed myself before. I sank into the nearest chair, trying to process the house, my memories, the care I had invested. All of it suddenly felt out of reach, dangling on the edge of misunderstanding and mistake. I wanted to speak, to argue, to demand clarity, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I felt my chest tighten, my mind racing through every small moment, every subtle shift, every instance that had hinted at this outcome. For the first time, I saw the fragility of the balance we had always taken for granted. The love, the trust, the quiet rhythm of our home, it all seemed vulnerable, easily disrupted by an overlooked detail, an unspoken assumption. And in that moment, I realized that nothing could ever be the same again. My parents looked at me with a mixture of guilt and confusion. We didn't realize your name was on the deed," my father admitted softly, his voice heavy with regret. "We thought we were just giving her a little gift, something to show our appreciation." I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight. My sister stood quietly, shifting from foot to foot, her eyes darting between us all. "I didn't mean to." I shook my head, feeling the walls close in. "I don't know what to say," I murmured, voice low. "I never imagined this would happen, not like this." My mother reached out, touching my hand gently. "We made a mistake," she said. "We didn't see it coming. We didn't mean to hurt you." I looked at them all, my sister and my parents, and I felt a mixture of love, confusion, and sorrow. It was a strange kind of pain, quiet but deep, the kind that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. At that moment, I realized that this turning point wasn't just about a house, it was about understanding, forgiveness, and the fragile, intricate threads that hold a family together. The rest of the evening passed in a strange, quiet haze. My sister stayed nearby, but the tension made our usual ease impossible. We spoke in soft, careful tones, as if the house itself were listening. I walked from room to room, touching familiar objects, remembering the hours I had spent caring for this place. Each familiar corner now felt different, carrying a weight I couldn't shake. I thought about all the small moments I had ignored, all the times I let her take the lead because I didn't want conflict. I realized now how those little decisions had slowly shifted the balance, making room for this misunderstanding to grow. I felt a quiet grief, not for the house itself, but for the innocence of our family life, for the trust I had taken for granted. At one point, I sat at the dining table, staring at the papers that proved my ownership. My parents looked at me, hesitant. "We didn't know," my father said again. "We never meant to take it from you." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know you didn't mean it, but it still hurts. It really does." There was no yelling, no anger, just a shared understanding of how fragile the ties between us could be. I looked at my sister, her eyes glistening with regret, and felt a small, tentative warmth return. Maybe this wasn't the end. Yes, it was a turning point, but also a chance to rebuild, carefully, slowly, with honesty and care. For the first time that day, I felt the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen, ever so slightly. The house was still the same, the walls unchanged, but everything inside me had shifted, and I knew that moving forward, nothing would ever feel as simple as it once had. The days after that conversation were quiet but heavy. I spent a lot of time walking through the house alone, touching familiar objects, trying to understand what had changed, not the walls, not the furniture, but the feelings tied to every corner. The house still held our memories, but now each memory came with a faint shadow, a reminder of misunderstanding and fragile trust. My parents were careful around me, their voices softer, their gestures tentative. They tried to include me in decisions, but the ease we once had felt gone, replaced by a cautious politeness. I wanted to tell them it was okay, that I forgave them, but the words seemed too large, too heavy to say out loud.
My sister avoided me for a few days, giving me space, and I think it was the silence that spoke the loudest. When she finally approached, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table. "I never wanted this to happen," she said, her voice quiet. I didn't see how much this meant to you." I looked at her, seeing her sincerity, and felt a flicker of the warmth we had always shared. "I know," I whispered. "It hurts, but I understand. We didn't see things the same way." From that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about seeing the other person's perspective, acknowledging the hurt, and choosing to move forward without letting it fester. The house was still mine in the legal sense, but ownership had always been more than a piece of paper. It was about connection, care, and intention. And now, those things had to be rebuilt slowly, one conversation at a time. I began to notice small changes, the way she asked before moving things, how our parents included me in planning, how we laughed again over shared memories. The tension was still there, quiet beneath the surface, but it was softening, like frost melting under the morning sun. Over the next few weeks, our interactions began to shift. I noticed my sister making small, thoughtful gestures, leaving my favorite chair where it had always been, asking before rearranging anything, even offering to help with repairs I had planned for months. Each act was quiet and unspoken, but it carried meaning. Slowly, the tension that had felt so heavy in the house began to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of balance. My parents also adjusted. They apologized again, not in grand, dramatic speeches, but in small, sincere ways. "We didn't think it through," my mother said one evening as we washed dishes together. "We just wanted to show how proud we are of both of you." My father nodded, quietly agreeing, and I felt the warmth I had missed, the feeling that, despite mistakes, love was still the foundation of our family. I realized that the house, as much as it had caused conflict, was also teaching us something important. It wasn't just a building, a deed, or a piece of property. It was a reflection of how we treated each other, of patience, understanding, and empathy. The ownership didn't define our connection, our actions did. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the porch with my sister, watching the rain fall softly on the garden. We didn't speak at first. Then she said quietly, "I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner." I nodded, feeling the heaviness lift. "Me too," I replied. I think we both have to learn from this." That day, I realized that resolution wasn't about reclaiming what was legally mine. It was about reclaiming trust, restoring respect, and choosing to see each other clearly, even after mistakes. The house was the same, but the way we inhabited it together had changed, and in a quiet, meaningful way, it was stronger than before. By the time a month had passed, the house felt like home again. Not the same effortless comfort as before, but a deeper, more intentional kind of belonging. Conversations were gentler, smiles more aware, and laughter returned, soft but genuine. My sister and I began spending time together in ways we hadn't in months, sharing stories, helping with small projects, and remembering why we had always been close. My parents watched quietly, relieved to see the tension ease. We didn't need grand declarations or apologies anymore. The small, consistent acts of care spoke louder than words. I realized that the house had never truly belonged to any of us. It belonged to all of us, as long as we treated it with love and respect. One evening, I sat in the study looking at the papers that proved the house was legally mine. I didn't feel triumph or victory. Instead, I felt gratitude for understanding, for patience, and for the chance to rebuild what had been strained. Ownership meant less than the relationships I had with the people inside these walls. As I closed the papers and set them aside, my sister came in holding a small cup of tea. "For you," she said softly, and I took it,
feeling the warmth not just from the cup, but from the quiet reconciliation between us. At that moment, I understood that resolution wasn't about winning or losing. It was about seeing each other clearly, forgiving quietly, and choosing to care despite mistakes. The house remained ours in a way that mattered more than any legal document ever could. And I carried that lesson forward, quietly, gratefully, and with hope. If this story touched you, take a moment to think about the people you love. Sometimes misunderstandings happen, and small actions can carry more meaning than words. Reach out, talk, forgive, or simply listen. If you've ever faced a situation like this, share your experience in the comments. We'd love to hear your story and how you found understanding or peace. And if you want more real-life stories that remind us of the power of family, trust, and quiet resilience, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of heartfelt storytelling. Remember, it's not the house, the deed, or the possessions that define us. It's how we care for the people inside our lives.